Okay, let's take a look at the homework, page 33. Okay, so we're looking for 8 mistakes. You can add or take out words, but you cannot change word order or punctuation. Fascinating. Okay. So this is the first mistake. I walked back to the mall. I couldn't remember where I'd parked my car. These two sentences go in opposite directions. So this word should be something like but or however. We have the opposite mistake here. I've had enough of this. I've decided I'm going to send my car to a new home in the suburbs. It feels like these two sentences go in similar directions, so it can't be yet. Um, you could say so. So like I've had enough of this is the reason, and the effect is sending their car away. So you could say so. You could also say and, like the fact that I've had enough just is my decision to send my car away. So you could say so or and. Funny thing about and, if for some reason um, you don't want to use so or not a conjunction, but to, um, maybe for reasons of style or readability, you can replace them with and. So like, usually we say try to, right? Try to do something. But if you say, I want to try to do something, you're using the word to twice. And so instead, many people will say, I want to try and do something. So similar logic here. You can say, so I've decided, or you can say, and I've decided. Next one is here. The carpool was okay, comma. So we can't use a conjunctive adverb like nevertheless. Instead, we should replace it with but. Next one is here. This is actually very common in spoken English, but in written English, although must begin a subordinate clause, by itself, it is not a conjunctive adverb. So you can't just say although, comma. Here, I think we can either replace it with something like however, nonetheless, nevertheless, despite this, the whole list, or you can just say but with no comma. Next one is here. Besides is a conjunctive adverb, so you have to put a semicolon in front and a comma behind. But here we cannot change the punctuation. We can only change the word. So I think the best word is and, right? Besides, uh, the two sentences go in the same direction, so it should be and. And it's a phenomenal waste of time. Next one is here. Same thing. Whereas is not a conjunctive adverb. You can't just use it like this. Um, we can replace it with another conjunctive adverb, right? Like we can say still, nonetheless. Again, the whole list applies here. Or you can say but. Next one is here. The previous sentence is saying that parking on the streets is very expensive. The next sentence says, I've decided to leave my car at my cousin Brent's house. So these two sentences go in the same direction. In fact, the first sentence is the cause. The second sentence is the effect. So here we need something like therefore, thus, hence, ergo, the whole list. Next one is here. Otherwise is a conjunctive adverb. You need a semicolon first and then a comma later. So we need a different word. And so the other word is or. Okay, is that 8? Did we get 8 mistakes? Okay, questions about this page? All right, next page. Okay, we have 5 correct sentences and 5 sentences with problems. Okay. Well, the first sentence has a problem. We don't have a subject. It should be something like I am announcing or we are announcing, something like that. Okay, and then this sentence is also wrong. It looks like his first task is the subject, but then we don't have a main verb, right? To introduce is not a main verb. Finding out is not a main verb. Also, his first task, but then it has 3 things: introduce, find out, uh, or introduce and find out A, find out B. Okay, I guess we can consider all of this one task, right? So we need a main verb. His first task is to introduce. And then we need to like integrate this part into the sentence better. As it currently stands, this sentence means that introducing himself to every customer is the same thing as finding out blah, 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 which I don't think that makes sense. So we have to integrate this in a different way. Okay, I would say and to find out. The most direct way is just to cancel the comma and say and find out. But then we have find out A and find out B. So the sentence would become introduce himself to every customer and find out what has been done in the past and how our relationship may be improved. The ands are not on the same level, right? The first and is higher, the second and is lower. So to separate the two, we can keep the comma um, and also keep the to so that we know that to find out is on the same level as to introduce. That way the sentence is most clear, clearest. Okay. Uh, this is a very small mistake, but there should be a comma here. If you end a sentence with either or too, like too much, TOO, you have to add a comma first. Next is this You can't just use a comma here. Abner is completely honest is a complete sentence. He considers integrity his middle name is a complete sentence. You at least need a semicolon. You can also use a period and capital H. You can also just add the word and. Many options here. Next, furthermore is a conjunctive adverb, so we need to replace that first comma with a semicolon or change it to a period and then capitalize the F. Okay, was that 5? Yeah, okay. Questions about this page? All right, next page. 10 mistakes, and these are all related to, I think, vocabulary. Maybe. Okay, yeah, so first of all, this one should be further. Farther is limited to geography, physical distance. Further can be either one, can be distance, can be ideas. So further study means higher study, more study. So it should be further, not farther. Next, this should be affected with an A, AFF. Um, okay, so let me say a bit more about these two words. Usually we say that affect is a noun or a verb, right? You affect somebody, and its noun form is E. So like you have an the way that you affect someone is you have an effect on them. But in fact, both words also have another meaning. The noun here is pronounced affect, and it means something like emotion or like physical presentation of a person, how they feel, the vibe, if you will. Whereas effect as a verb means to make happen, to make real. So here, this sentence looks like it says, it made real the lives of many residents. Which really, of course, that does not make sense. What it wants is a effect. It had an influence on the lives of many residents of our town. Next one, a lot is two words, a and lot. Next one, this is should have been famous. This is a common mistake of native speakers because should have is often shortened to should have. So it sounds like should of, but it should be should have. Next one, this should be, this should be since. Um, if you use being that, you're using the first word ends in ing, right? So this is a participial construction from the first half of the semester, which means that the implied subject of this half of the sentence needs to be the same subject as the second half of the sentence. The subject of the second half of the sentence is his writing. And the first half of the sentence already has a subject. So this grammar is wrong. Therefore, we have to re-examine the relationship between these two sentences. Number one, he spent much time studying grammar. Number two, his writing was always good. This is a cause and effect relationship. The first half is the reason, so you can say since or because. You can also just cancel this part and add something here to show that it's the effect, like so. So his writing was always all right. Next one, all right is two words. ALL, right. I know this word is very common online. It is not actually a real word. Next one, sat. Sat down to supper, which means he just sat down at the dinner table. He's preparing to eat dinner. Next one, this should be regardless. Irregardless is also not a real word, but it's something that many native speakers use accidentally. Some people think that this is a combination of two words. The first one is regardless, and the second one is irrespective. But what you're really looking for is irrespective of something, which means unrelated to this thing. Respect here means aspect. So irrespective of means not related to any aspect of this thing. The word respect as aspect is still used in phrases like in uh, one respect or like in this respect, which just means aspect. The two words share the same root. Spect means to look, right? We have spectator, which is an onlooker, somebody who's standing next to the thing and looking at the thing. We have inspect, which means to examine. We have spectacle, which is something that attracts your attention. So spect means look. Respect means look again or look harder. Aspect means related to looking at this thing. Next one, this should be lie. Lie down. Should I review these words, lie and lay? Everybody gets these wrong except me. Lie, lay, lay. This is when you lie down, when the subject lies down. Lay, laid, lain. This is when you put something down, when the subject puts the object down. And then, of course, you have lie, lied, lied. This is when you say something that is not true. So just to help you remember, this is the subject talking about the subject. This is talking about the object. And this is saying something that is not true. Uh, okay, was that 10? It doesn't feel like 10. Was that 10? One more? Okay, let's dive back in. Okay. Like if you really care about this, heard to have said. Think about the timeline. He's already dead. If you use to say, it's related to like uh, the present tense. It's saying that like this is something he often said. But apparently he only said this once, right before he died. So you need some grammar to tell us that this action has been completed. So it should be heard to have said. Have is the perfect aspect which you use when something has been finished, and the fact that it has been finished affects your understanding of the rest of the sentence. This is something we talked about last semester. Okay, questions about this page? All right, so today we are going to talk about something new. We're going to talk about style. Style is the emphasis of your sentence, how a sentence makes your reader feel. There can be many ways to write a grammatically correct sentence, and different ways will make your reader feel different things. You might put an emphasis on a different part of a sentence. Maybe you make the sentence feel happy or sad or angry. Maybe you use style to hide information. And this brings us to the ethics of grammar. We've always been talking about, is this sentence correct? Does there need to, does it need to be fixed in some way? But why do we need to write things correctly? The main reason you guys are probably thinking of is so that the other person can absolutely understand you, no problem. And this is true. But even when you have correct grammar, you can still write in a way where other people don't understand you intentionally. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes it's just a bad sentence that's hard to understand. One good example of this is in, I think, 2003, there was a space shuttle disaster, 太空梭爆炸. I don't know if you remember this. You were probably very young. But the space shuttle uh, launched, and then before it reached space, it blew up. Now, after that, there was an investigation, and they found the reason, and they also found that before the launch, an engineer did warn people this could be a problem. Now, why did nobody fix the problem? Because the engineer put this as one small point in a PowerPoint slide filled with other information. So nobody noticed the warning. It was there, but it was hard to see. This is unintentional. But sometimes um, maybe like companies will try to intentionally hide information from you. Maybe the law requires that they tell you something, but that information is bad for their business. So they tell you in a way that it's not easy for you to understand, so that they can say, hey, we told you, according to the law, we didn't break the law, but they'll still try to avoid the negative consequences. Let me give you an example from the film Dark Waters, starring Mark Ruffalo, uh, from 2019. This is based on a real story. Let me give you a brief introduction to the story, which is, you guys know about Teflon, right? 铁氟龙不粘锅. It's a chemical that you can add to like a cooking pan so that whatever you make will not stick to the pot. It was later found that these chemicals were very, very harmful. This story, or this movie, tells the story of how that information was made public. Turns out the company that makes Teflon knew it was poisonous, but they used many tricky ways to prevent people from learning about this. And so in this example, what you will see is the company uses the local water company to send a legally required message to the residents of the area. And the message just says, we found some chemicals in your water, but they are not like they do are not more than the legally required amount. Everything is fine. So why would they send a letter telling you there's no problem? Turns out that it's related to the fact that there is a lawsuit. So they're avoiding being sued by telling you that there's no problem. But they mentioned that there are chemicals, right? It just said there's not too much, but there are chemicals. Turns out, after they tell you that there are chemicals, you only have, I think it was like 5 years to sue them. And so if you let those 5 years pass, you no longer can take them to court. That idea is called the statute of limitations, 追诉期. Um, so this clip is cut into two parts. And if you're watching on Teams, I don't think Teams will record the audio for this. Okay, that was the first section. As you can see, the language is very hard to understand. And so later on, a lawyer discovers what it actually means. Let's see, 1:12:46. The film is here if you want to watch it at home. It's pretty good film. So you can see that unclear hard to understand writing is sometimes intentional. And that's why it's very important to understand grammar and style to protect yourself. Okay, so let's get into style. I'm using another textbook um, that I have put on Moodle, this one. It's a very big file if you want to download it. And we're looking at chapter, what chapter is this? One of the later chapters. I think this is chapter 9 out of 10 chapters. Yeah, so like page 162. We're going to talk about the shape of a sentence, and then we're going to do some practice improving sentences. Yeah, sorry, chapter 10. Um, so first, the textbook gives us this sentence, and then it will give us an improved version here. So let's look at the original sentence and see why it's not a very good sentence, even though it is correct. In addition to differences in ethnicity or religion that have for centuries plagued Sunnis and Shiites, explanations of the causes of their distrust must include all of the other social, economic, and cultural conflicts that have plagued them that are rooted in a troubled history that extends 1,300 years into the past. What the fuck? No idea what it's saying. And there are a number of reasons for this. First of all, the subject is here. So all of this previous stuff is not the beginning of the sentence. It's information that you have to keep in mind while you prepare to see what the subject is. Secondly, there are way too many nouns, explanations, causes, distrust as a noun. You can change a lot of, and like conflicts, you can change a lot of these nouns to verbs. Verbs are easier for people to understand. And then a third reason is there are too many embedded clauses, like of, that, that. When you have too many levels to a sentence, it's harder to remember. And then you also have some like, it's too wordy, too much unimportant words. And we'll see a few of them later. And one small last problem is it repeats the verb plague. It's not hard to understand, it's just annoying. So the first modification is to find the subject and bring it to the front. Let's see, the original is one sentence, but it doesn't have to be one sentence. It can be more than one sentence if it's easier to understand. So here, looks like if you're talking about history, then the subject could be historians. Historians have tried to explain why Sunnis and Shiites distrust one another today. Right? So we have turned explanation to explain. We have turned distrust from a noun to a verb. This first sentence is immediately so much easier to understand. Many have claimed that the sources of conflict are age-old differences in religion. But they must also consider all the other social, economic, and cultural conflicts that have plagued their 1,300 years of troubled history. Okay, so each independent sentence is now much easier to understand. But it no longer feels like one sentence. It's not one sentence, but it should still feel like it belongs together. So the author has put these parts back together into one sentence in a way that's easier to understand. To explain why Sunnis and Shiites distrust one another today, historians must study not only age-old religious differences, but all the other social, economic, and cultural conflicts that have plagued their 1,300 years of troubled history. Isn't that much easier to understand than the first sentence? Even if there are a lot of words you don't know, you can still feel what this sentence is talking about. It's talking about two groups of people. They don't get along. How do we understand why they don't get along? But if we go back to the first sentence, in addition to differences in ethnicity or religion that have for centuries plagued Sunnis and Shiites, explanations of the causes of their distrust must include all of the other social, economic, and cultural conflicts that have plagued them that are rooted in a troubled history that extends 1300 years into the past. Just so hard to understand. The new version is much better. So how do we get from the first version to the third version? What are some principles that we can pay attention to? That's the subject of this chapter. So as I actually already mentioned, first, make sure that the main clause, the main part of the sentence, comes early enough. Don't make readers wait for too long. After the main part of the sentence, try to avoid adding on way too many subordinate clauses, extra information. Don't drag out the sentence too long. Don't keep interrupting the reader, right? We want to make sure that the sentence flows smoothly. So the first one, revising long openings. Let's look at this negative example. Since most undergraduate students change their fields of study at least once during their college careers, many more than once, first-year students who are not certain about their program of studies should not load up their schedules to meet requirements for a particular program. Question, where is the subject? It's here. First-year students. You have 2 lines of information that we have to remember before we get to the subject. That is way too much. Also, you have like this inserted extra information in front of the subject. So the first one is bring out the subject faster. But then here's another question. Where is the main verb? Here. Should not load up. The subject is here. The verb is here. In between is also information we have to remember before we understand what the sentence is talking about. So we should try to put the subject and the verb close together, and we should try to put this part near the beginning of the sentence. So let's see how we can fix this. We move first-year students to the front, and then should not load up their schedules is the main verb and the object. So should not load up their schedules with requirements for a particular program if they are not. So in the original, it says who are not. So you have to remember, oh, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But here it says if they are not, which tells you it could be yes, it could be no. And then the original sentence says since, and it gives you the reason. Yes, it gives you the cause, and then it gives you the effect. We can flip this using because to put the reason near the end of the sentence. So the sentence then becomes, first-year students should not load up their schedules with requirements for a particular program if they are not certain about the program of studies they want to pursue, because most change their major fields of study at least once during their college careers. It's still a long sentence, but it's easier to understand than the first version. If you have trouble understanding this version, it's probably because of vocabulary and not because of grammar or style. Okay. Next, try to move the main verb closer to the subject. And to do this, you want to avoid long abstract subjects. You want to avoid interrupting between the subject and verb, and you should also try to avoid interrupting between the verb and the object. So let's look at this sentence. Abco Inc.'s understanding of the drivers of its profitability in the Asian market for small electronics, and the main verb is helped. So the main subject is understanding, but this is an abstract subject. Understand what? In order to know what it's talking about, you have to finish the rest of this part, and then you get to the main subject. That's just too hard to understand. So we can rewrite it like this. Abco Inc., subject, was able to pursue, verb. So it's now using this as its main verb. It's flipping the sentence around. Abco Inc. was able to pursue opportunities in Africa because, and then you move the extra information to the end. Because it understood what drove profitability. The drivers of its profitability, it's two nouns, but here what drove profitability is one noun, making it easier to understand. Let's look at this one. A company, this is the subject, is the verb. All of that extra stuff is getting in between your subject and your verb. And it's a relative clause that focuses on. So all of this is extra information. You don't need to put this here. So one way to solve this problem is instead of using a relative clause, and you have to remember you're talking about a company, you can add this together and into a subordinate clause when a company. When a company focuses on hiring the best personnel and then trains them not just for the work they're hired to do, but for higher level jobs, it is likely to earn the loyalty of its employees. It's not a perfect sentence. It could be improved, but it is much better than the first one. So the author also knows this is not a very good sentence, so it gives you another version here. A company is likely to earn the loyalty of its employees when, okay, so it is a subordinate clause, so you don't have to put it first. You can put it at the end of the sentence. A company is likely blah, blah, blah when it. That's what it's doing. A company blah, blah, blah when it. It's just flipping the sentence. But finally, there's another option. You don't have to use only one sentence. You can split it into two sentences. Some companies focus on hiring the best personnel and then train them not just for the work they're hired to do, but for higher level jobs later. Such companies are likely to earn the loyalty of their employees. Much easier to understand. Okay, this one, the subject is scientists. The verb is do not communicate. And you have extra information in the middle. You can put this at the end. There's no reason you have to put a because in the middle of a sentence. So let's see. Yeah. Some scientists, because they write in a style that is impersonal and objective, do not easily communicate with lay people, can be improved to since some scientists write in a style. So we're moving the because to the front of the sentence, right? Since they, the subject, scientists, do not easily communicate with lay people. Right. So that's an improvement. Same thing here. We as a subject, develop is the verb, and the object is a core of knowledge. Again, you have things interrupting in between. Try to move it to somewhere else. You can move it to the beginning. You can move it to the end. Just, try not to interrupt subject, verb, object. The one exception is if your extra information is very short. Then it doesn't make sense to ask your reader to read the rest of the sentence only to wait for this small part. For this, you can move it to the after the main verb. So compare these two. In a long sentence, put the newest and most important information that you want your reader to remember at its end. Versus, in a long sentence, put at its end the newest and most important information that you want your reader to remember. The first version, by the time you get to at its end, you probably have forgotten what you're talking about. But in the second version, when you put it earlier, you remember, oh, we're talking about the sentence. It is referring to the sentence. So if it's short, you can move it to the beginning because it's not a serious interruption. Okay, next, start with your main point. So high deductible health plans and health savings accounts is your subject, into which workers and their employers make tax deductible deposits. Result in is your verb. First of all, we know that we can move this somewhere else. But when you think about where should we move it, it makes us realize, wait, what is this sentence saying? What is the point? It's about insurance, so I'm not going to explain the details to you, but basically this results in workers taking more responsibility for their healthcare. And it's because these things workers can put money into them. So the logic should be the key point should be workers, right? That's what we want to say. Workers can take more responsibility because when you use these health plans, workers can put money into them. And that's what the author suggests writing. The main point is workers take more responsibility for their healthcare when they adopt high deductible insurance plans and health savings accounts into which they and their employers deposit tax deductible contributions. So that's exactly what I just said. Workers take more responsibility if they use these things because they can put money into these things. It's the same order of ideas, just using more detailed words. So like grab onto your main point. And this is the explanation for what the author was just doing. This is your main point. This is explaining your main point. You should put your main point first and then give the explanation, right? Main point here and then explanation here. So here's a general principle from these examples so far. We can best manage complexity when we begin with something short and direct that frames the more complex information that follows. This means we begin with shorter parts and then we go on to longer parts. And those shorter parts should help us understand the longer parts. The shorter parts should help us prepare for the longer parts. And that's how you create a sentence that is easier to understand. So begin a paragraph with a sentence or two expressing its point. Begin a section of a document with a paragraph stating its point. In English writing, we like to put the main idea first. Okay, that's the end of the introduction. In the next period, we're going to do some practice. How can you improve these sentences? And this is on your handout, page 36. So try to improve the first sentence during the break, and then we'll compare answers after the break. Okay, let's take a look at this first sentence. Explaining why Shakespeare decided to have Lady Macbeth die off stage rather than letting the audience see her die has to do with understanding the audience's reactions to Macbeth's death. Very, very bad sentence. First of all, the subject is explaining, which is an abstract noun. You have to read explain what to understand what the subject is. The main verb is has to do with. It appears much too late and is also an abstract verb. Has to do with is not an actual action. And then the explaining noun is also understanding, which is another uh, abstract noun. And what do you understand? The audience's reactions. You can turn this into a verb. So how can we improve this sentence? Well, what is the main point? In your own words, the main point is you have to understand the audience's reactions in order to understand why Shakespeare did this. Basically, right? So let's use that structure. You have to understand, or one must understand the audience's reactions to Macbeth's death in order to explain why Shakespeare decided to have Lady Macbeth die offstage rather than the audience see her die. Period. So the one major thing you can do is just flip the sentence around. But it's still kind of long. Um, so let's see. Um, I have actually pre-written some answers for this part. I'm going to use them now, and I will let you see this document next week. So this is the original sentence, right? Um, for each sentence, I give 3 or 4 versions. Um, the last or second to last, sorry, the last version is always the shortest and maybe the best, but sometimes the second to last version is the best. It is possible to write a sentence that is too short. So the first thing we can do is you can add a concrete subject. So from explaining to we can explain, and then from decided to have, you can just use the word had. Have as an order to make something happen. Can Shakespeare arrange something without deciding to arrange something? I think no. The word have means Shakespeare arranged for this to happen, which means he decided to arrange. So you don't need to say decided to. That's just extra. That's redundant. 容词缀字. So Shakespeare had Lady Macbeth die offstage. Offstage can be one word. Now, offstage, rather than letting the audience see her die, this is also extra information. Offstage just means the audience does not see her die. So the opposite is, of course, the audience does see her die. So you don't actually need this second alternative. You can just delete that. Has to do with understanding. You can just change that to by understanding. The audience's reactions to me, and then the rest of the sentence is the same. So this is already a better sentence because you have a concrete subject and you take out unnecessary words. But it's still a little hard to understand because the explanation comes after this like middle lengthy part. And then like understanding the audience's reactions is a bit abstract. So we can improve this. Second version, to explain why Shakespeare had Lady Macbeth die off stage, we must understand. So we still have the concrete subject, but we have moved it to the second half so that this is no longer abstract. it is now a concrete action called understand. Then the abstract noun audience's reactions, we can turn this into a verb, how the audience reacted. So we have turned two abstract nouns into concrete verbs. But we can improve this a little bit more to understand why Shakespeare killed Lady Macbeth offstage. Isn't just what this is saying? Have Lady Macbeth die? Doesn't that just mean kill Lady Macbeth? So this is a more concrete, vivid verb than the word had. We must, okay, so instead of saying explain, we say understand. Because the point is not to explain. The point is to understand. Explain means to help other people understand. But really, this sentence is saying, how do we understand? So the correct word should be understand and not explain. Therefore, we have to change this word. And we can change it to consider. We must consider the audience reaction to Macbeth's death. Or you can keep this part. You must consider how the audience reacted to Macbeth's death. Questions about number one? Okay, let's try number two. Why didn't I give you number three? Oh, yes, I remember why I didn't give you the number two. Because the book gives you the answer to number two. Is that a good enough reason? 3, 4, 5. Yeah, why didn't I give you the answer to number two? Okay, so we have to do this together. Number two, an agreement by the film industry and by television producers on limiting characters using cigarettes, even if carried out, would do little to discourage young people from smoking. Terrible sentence. The main subject is agreement. Agreement between who? To do what? Unclear. And the main verb is would do little to discourage, which just means would not stop. And in between you have this like so much extra information. But the idea of the sentence, we have to find the main idea of the sentence. And the idea of the sentence is, okay, even if you get everybody working in film and TV to stop showing characters smoking, it would not stop young people from smoking. That's the main idea. So how can we rearrange and rewrite this sentence to clearly say that main idea? We can begin with even if, right? Even if we get the film industry and television producers to agree. So we have changed the word, the abstract noun agreement to the concrete verb agree. Agree to, it says limit characters using cigarettes. And that just means don't show characters smoking. So agree to not show characters smoking. It, which means like this thing that they have agreed to, would not stop young people from smoking. And the sentence is immediately much better. But there's one idea that is lost. And this is important because remember in the final exam, you cannot lose information. The idea is here, even if carried out. So this means, okay, they have an agreement. Maybe the agreement won't work. They actually do what they say they will do in the agreement. Okay, but it still won't work. These are two separate ideas, right? We agree to do something, and then we do something. Two different ideas. So let's see how we can fit this into the sentence. Okay, so we currently have even if we get the film industry and television producers to agree to uh, not show characters smoking, and then we can add this middle part. And even if they actually follow the agreement, and then it would not stop young people from smoking. That's much easier to understand, right? Um, but there is in this version of the sentence, we have added one extra piece of information, the subject, we, even if we get. I don't think we need that. Even if the film industry and television producers agree, I think that's clear enough. Okay, questions? Do you want me to type out the sentence? Yeah, okay. Yeah, just a reminder on your final exam, question 10 will give you a long and complicated sentence and ask you to make it easier to understand. You can use more than one sentence. It doesn't have, your answer does not have to be just one sentence. But you do have to keep all of the information and it has to have perfect grammar. So that's the improved version. And you can compare the two versions and see that the new version is easier to understand. Yes? It's not necessarily shorter, but it's easier to understand. And that's what we're looking for. Questions so far? Okay, let's go to number 3. This is okay. I have taught this unit before, and every time I think this is one of the worst sentences I've ever seen in my life. A student's right to have access to his or her own records, including medical records, academic reports, and confidential comments by advisors, will generally take precedence over an institution's desire to keep records private, except when limitations of those rights under specified circumstances are agreed to by students during registration. Again, what the fuck? What is this sentence saying? Okay, we can grab some keywords, right? Students' rights, and it's talking about records, and it's talking about keeping records private or to give students access. And then there's an exception. So that can help us find the general structure here. It looks like the idea is uh, schools want to keep student information, student records private, but students should have the right to see their records, except when certain situations apply. Yeah, okay, I think that's the basic structure, or the basic idea, right? The school wants to keep it private, students should be able to see it, and then there are certain exceptions. So we can say, even though school institutions, uh, it says desire. That's not a very concrete word in this case, because schools can't have desire. Um, even if an institution wishes to keep student records private, comma, students have the right to access their own records, including medical records, academic reports, and confidential advisor comments, except when they agree to keep, I don't know, agree to blah, blah, blah during registration. So like if they agree with the school that, okay, some of these records I will not be able to see, then those will be kept private, but they have to agree during registration. They can't just agree anytime. And they're under specified circumstances. And this is actually important information. Specified circumstances. This is very important, which means when the student makes an agreement with the school, they have to actually say what are the circumstances where the records will be kept private. So let's see how we can fit that information in. So we had the first half, right? Except, or I guess we can say unless, right? Unless the student agrees with the school during registration to keep those records private under certain circumstances, specified circumstances. I think that works. Okay, so let me write that down and we can compare to see if we have lost any information and if it's easier to understand. Wait, how did I begin the sentence? Hang on. Uh, oh yeah, I remember now. I remember now. So, although good and including comments, unless they agree to the see and private easier to understand? No? Hmm. Okay, let's see the answer I prepared. Now you can cut it into different sentences. It doesn't have to be one sentence. So let's see what I have here. Number 3. Okay, wow. I decided to cut a lot of information. So yes, the first thing you'll notice, it does begin with students. This is the important part. Students generally have the right to access their own records. This is the first part rewritten. And it says including blah, blah, and blah. The word including means there could be more. So these are just examples of certain kinds of records. And, we can take out the examples. So the main sentence ends here. And it looks like I decided to take out this part as well because the opposite of a student being able to see their records is a student not being able to see their records. Why would a student not be able to see their records? Because the institution doesn't want them to see it. It seems to be logically connected. So we don't have to say this part. The word generally already tells you there are some situations where students do not have the right. So that takes care of the first half. Then we get to the exception, except when, and we use if, and then we use agree as the concrete verb. The exception is if during registration, they have agreed to specific limits on this right. Now that's easier to understand, right? Sure. We can make it even easier to understand, but we have to add some this is the 2-sentence version. If we want to do the 1-sentence version, a first pass might look like this. Changing singular to plural makes it shorter. Students' right to have access to just means access. His or her now becomes their because of plural. Records. We skip the examples. Generally takes precedence over on institutions' desire to keep those records private unless they agree to limits on their rights during registration. Okay, so this is a better 1-sentence version. It's still not a good sentence. The best version I could think of is this one. Students generally have the right to access their own records, except if they have agreed during registration to specific limits on this right. Easier to understand? Okay, so it may not be easy to understand, but it is easier to understand than this long thing. Look, look. Students generally have the right to access their own records, except if they have agreed during registration to specific limits on this right. Makes a much better sentence. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do here. Questions about this one? Okay, let's do, where is it? Let's do number 4. The construction of the interstate highway system. So this is, in America, this is just the highways. Owing to the fact that Congress, on the occasion when it originally voted funds for it, did not anticipate the rising cost of inflation, ran into serious financial problems. Okay, so the main sentence is the construction of the highways ran into serious financial problems because Congress blah, 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 blah. That's the main structure we can follow. Um, the main problem with this sentence is it keeps adding information in the middle that could better fit at the end. So we just take all of this extra information and we throw it to the end of the sentence. So we begin, the construction of the interstate highway system ran into serious financial problems because Congress did not anticipate, right? If the subject is Congress, then the verb is did not anticipate the rising cost of inflation on the occasion when just means when. Rising cost of inflation when it originally voted funds for it. Let me write that down for you. Okay, so that is immediately a better sentence. but it could be even better. Let's look at this. Ran into serious financial problems because Congress did not anticipate the rising cost of inflation. Okay, if we're talking about inflation, 通货膨胀, if we're talking about funds, which means money, we don't need financial. The idea of money is already part of the sentence. We don't need to say financial here. Here's another one. The rising cost of inflation. What is inflation? Inflation is rising costs. So this is saying the rising cost of rising costs. You don't need the first half. Next, voted is in the past. Originally means at the first moment. You don't need to say this. It's already in the past. So the sentence has become slightly shorter and easier to understand. And then let's see the answer I have prepared. Okay, so the two-sentence version is the construction of the interstate highway system ran into serious financial problems. This is because Congress, when voting funds for it, did not anticipate the rising cost of inflation. It's easier to understand, but it's not yet a very good sentence. Here's a good one-sentence version. It was hard to construct. So we get a verb, not the construction of, but it was hard to construct the interstate highway system because Congress, and now instead of using the verb voted, we just use the word funded, which means to give it money. Funded it without considering inflation. So we change did not anticipate into without considering. This sentence says exactly the same thing in a much easier to understand way. Yes, but you can't see it till next week because I have hidden it from you in order to encourage you to practice. Questions about this one? Okay, let's do the next one, number 5. We can, yeah, we'll keep that. Such prejudicial conduct or behavior, regardless of the reasons offered to justify it, is rarely, not at least to some degree, prejudicial to good order and discipline. Okay. So the subject is behavior. The verb is, and like it's saying, okay, so like what is this sentence saying? The grammar doesn't really help us. What is the sentence actually saying? This behavior is harmful to good order and discipline, regardless of any reasons you try to use to justify it. Okay, that's already a better sentence. Such behavior is to some no, no, is somewhat no. Mm, it's saying a little bit harmful. So let's see if we can keep that idea in there. Such behavior is at least a little harmful to good order and discipline, regardless of how one or how it is justified. Let me write that down. I should say conduct just means behavior. The two words are exactly the same. We don't need both words. I think this is saying the same thing as the original sentence. Yeah? Are we missing any information? I think it's the same. Let's see the answer I have prepared. Okay. So conduct or behavior, choose one. Such conduct is generally prejudicial to good order, regardless of any proffered justifications. It's shorter, but it's not really easier to understand. So let's look at the second one. Regardless of its justification, such conduct is prejudicial to good order. You know what? I think today's answer is better because you may not understand what it means to be prejudicial to something. It just means it's harmful. But all three of these sentences are better than the original. Questions? I think actually, like the first sentence about Shakespeare and this sentence are probably the best sentences from this practice. The places we can improve it are not as much as the rest of the sentences. Okay, let's do one more. Number 6. Yeah, yeah, okay. So we're doing half of this page today, and then your homework is the second half, and then the next page. Okay, number 6. TV reality shows. If you don't know this in Chinese, it's 实境秀. Because they have an appeal to our fascination with real life conflict because of our voyeuristic impulses. Voyeur means somebody who secretly looks at other people. Are about the most popular shows that are regularly scheduled to appear on TV. Okay, so what is this sentence saying? My God. Reality TV shows appeal to the fact that we like to look at other people when they fight. Therefore, they are very popular on TV. I think that's the basic idea. Yeah. So we start with the main subject, right? Reality TV shows, and the main verb is are very popular, are some of the most popular TV shows because they appeal to our fascination with real people's real conflicts. I think I think that's about it, right? Let me write that down. We can compare. Yeah. So like I did not include regularly scheduled to appear. I don't think that's very important. They're TV shows. TV shows are usually regularly scheduled, unless they're just one-off. But like a reality TV show is not a one-off performance. So by implication, it is usually regularly scheduled. We don't have to say that. Yeah, so I think these two sentences are saying the same thing. Let's see my prepared answer. Okay, so the first one is a multiple sentence version. TV reality shows are about the most popular shows. They are regularly scheduled to appear on TV. This is because they appeal to our fascination with real life conflict. We are fascinated because of our voyeuristic impulses. So like this version is just cutting up the different parts of the sentence and putting them in a logical order. This is perfectly fine. If you do this on the final exam, that's great. But we can try a one sentence version. Reality TV shows are about the most popular, regularly scheduled shows because they appeal to our voyeuristic impulses and fascination with real life conflict. Okay, so we've taken the basically the same sentence and we rearranged it so that the structure is easier to understand. Let's see if we can take out some redundant words. Reality shows. We don't need TV. All reality shows are on TV. Reality shows are some of the most popular TV programs. All right, so we put TV here. And then, like, again, TV programs are usually regularly scheduled. We don't need to say regularly scheduled because they appeal to our voyeuristic impulses and fascination. Like, what is the word impulses actually doing here? Impulse means lack of control. Do we need this idea here? I don't think we do. Uh, Voyeuristic fascination with real life conflict. Okay? And then the best version is reality TV is very popular. Right? Some of the most popular TV programs just is very popular because we have now used a singular subject, it appeals to our fascination with real life conflict. Yeah, we don't really need to say real people, right? If it's a real life conflict, it involves real people. You can't have a real life conflict with fictional people. Okay, questions about this one? All right, so that's it for today. Your homework is the rest of this page. You have 6 more. And please do page 37 also. That's the homework. Now, next week, there will be no new unit. We're just going to do lots and lots of practice. And we're going to try to finish the handout. If we don't finish the handout, the rest of the handout will be your homework. But in 2 weeks, it's the final exam. So we won't have time to compare answers to the homework. Therefore, I have also prepared the answers to next week's homework on Moodle, and I will let you see that after class next week. So you can practice yourself, you can compare answers yourself, and if you have questions, you can always write to ask me. Okay? Okay, see you next week.